Um, when we were picking out that song, who wrote that song? Who is that? Ruthie Foster? No.
Ruthie Foster covered it, but the Black Keys.
Black Keys.
Wrote it.
Yeah. So when we were thinking about doing that song, we were like, isn't this a song about a girl and her boyfriend or a lover or a guy and his lover, whatever? I mean, wasn't it that like it is? And I said, no. I said, this is really a song about you with that person who you disagree with really vehemently, and they're arguing with you. And you're saying, let me be your everlasting life. Because right now we're feeling lonely. Let me be your everlasting life. You see that? You see, that's really what we're talking about. And that's really what's hard in this world that we're in. And that's really what I think Epiphany is about, is learning to see the Christ, or namaste, the light in one another. But not just the light, yourself in the other, and them in you. Christ in me and Christ in you, God in all. That's really what this challenge is about, I think. And that's what takes practice, man. It takes a lot of practice to be able to do that. So we're going to be a little more casual this morning, because as I was thinking about it, of course, more people showed up. That's kind of nice. But as I was thinking about it this morning, I thought, you know what? Mary Ellen had texted me. Mary Ellen Barrow, you all know, many of you know her. She had texted me after doing Disciple Church at 8:30. And she said, you know what? I can come over and help, and if you need it. And I said, all right, come on over. And then I said, wait a minute. Come on up and we'll talk together. And she said, okay. And so I asked Mary Ellen to come join. But before she does, I want to tell a quick story, and then I'm going to invite her up here, and we're going to talk back and forth about this idea that I'm tossing around. And maybe it will spur some thoughts in you as well. So I shared this story quickly in my e-blast to everyone. I'm going to tell it a little bit longer here. But basically it's an old Chinese fable. And I heard it from a woman long time ago, a friend of mine by the name of Heather Forrest, who's a wonderful storyteller, I think out of the East Coast somewhere now. But she had been telling it, and I loved it, and I went up after her, and I told her I was kind of disappointed. So there's a stonecutter. It's an old story, and the stonecutter is way up on the side of a mountain, and he's chipping away, making blocks of stone, and he's chipping away, and just exhausted, of course, the day in and day out of this grunt work. And as he's chipping away, he notices a prince in a carriage and an entourage around him, that they're riding out across this desert below the mountain. And he's looking at this prince and his carriage and just thinking how fine the prince is and how lucky the prince is, and noticing all the wealth and how the prince has all these people around him who admire him and who are there for him. He's not alone. And he started thinking, I wish I were the prince. And it was as if a mountain spirit had heard his cry or his complaint or his wish, and he suddenly became the prince. He said, well, now finally, look at this. He said, this is amazing. I feel so significant. I feel so powerful. I'm the prince. And he was looking at all the things he had. He was watching the people walking around him, and he was feeling this sense of importance and significance. And when suddenly he realized he was exhausted because of the heat. The heat was bearing down on him. The sun was so bright and brilliant that day. He looked up. There was no way to get out of the way of that sun. That sun was on everything. He said, the sun is powerful. The sun is truly more significant than anything. I wish I were the sun. And so he was the sun. Suddenly he felt himself truly the most powerful. The vision that he had, the perspective that he had, the power that he had, literally casting this radiation down upon the earth, and everyone there had to scurry to find cover. He felt so powerful. He was satiated with this sense of power and this sense of significance when a bank of clouds moved in below him. He said, well, the clouds are blocking my significance. He said, how is that possible? Perhaps I should be a cloud. And so now he's the cloud. And he can feel the sun on his back and the cool beneath him, and he's providing shade, and now he's truly feeling important and significant when suddenly he feels the wind blowing him all about. He has no control over where he is. He is being cast about wherever the wind will move him, and so he wishes to be the moon. And you get what's about to happen. He decides he wishes to be the moon, and now, the cloud, the wind, and now he's the wind. And then once he's the wind, he's finding himself able to scatter everyone and everything in every direction, and how powerful and significant, until he runs into a mountain, and he can't move the mountain. So he says, I wish I was the mountain. That's what I should have been all along. And so he's the mountain when he suddenly feels something chipping away down below, on the edge down below on his side of the rocks on his side. And so you know the end of the story, he becomes the stonecutter. When my friend Heather told me this story, I said, I'm not sure I like that story. It kind of just looks like maybe the whole point of the story is that we just learn to live with our circumstance. We should learn to be happy with who we are. How to want what you have kind of thing. And yet I thought, and really, is that what it's all about? It's just about destiny. She said, no, I think you missed the point. See, everybody thinks that's what it is. You're going to find yourself right back where you started. No, it's really not about that. It's about the fact that he was never satisfied. That's really, I think, the challenge for us as human beings, especially in this world that we live in, especially us and the situation that we often find ourselves in this particular economy and culture and society that we find ourselves in. What does it mean to be satisfied? And even more, what does it mean to be significant? That aspect of the story really sort of speaks, I think, to what the Epiphany is all about. And I'll tell you why. Come on up, Mary Ellen, if you don't mind, and you can kind of start echoing and resonating with what I'm saying here. But one of the things that struck me as this Epiphany is that what the wise men might have found at the Epiphany, because we think of them as finding Jesus the Savior of the world, which is, I don't want to suggest that's not what they find. That's part of our deep religious tradition as Christians. It's part of the Messianic tradition for Jews. But there's something else that's going on that gets missed. First of all, why are these wise men even in the story? Right? Why are they even there? Because they're not Jewish. They're not a part of Judaism. They're not even from the area. And they come in out of nowhere. And the second thing is who or what do they see when they see Mary and Joseph and a baby? Spoiler alert, it's not the angelic display that you have on your tables where everyone looks beautiful. It's not the beautiful white Mary and Jesus and Joseph and all of those. In fact, it's a pretty muddy scene. It's a pretty dirty scene. And these are refugees. These are people on the run. This is a woman who's probably been outcast by those around her. It's not a pretty sight. It's not a comfortable reality. They are marginalized, and the wise men come upon them and see something and sense something. And it changes the direction, right? They go home another way. It changes. You were saying something that reminded you of.
Yeah, I really love this story. And I love the way that story evolves over time and situations. And I thought about this as I visited my family over the last week when I went to see my mom for surgery and to be a caregiver for a few days. And I thought, all of us have things that we look for, roles that we play, identity and purpose that we're given, whether we chose it or not. And sometimes we have the challenge and the opportunity to differentiate from that role and to become more authentic. And I think that as Tom is moving into this time of exploring spiritual or disciplines and practices that help us to live our best life and be more authentic, I think about where the light breaks through. And last night I was driving home and I was reflecting on the visit with my family, and I'm driving down I-20 and I see as the temperature is dropping rapidly. It was 83 degrees when I left, and 4 hours later, it's 30 degrees as I'm coming into Fort Worth. And I see this light appear, this searchlight that's spreading around the sky, blasting through the cold front as it was coming in last night. And I thought, golly, something's happened. What have I missed? I've been out of touch all day long traveling. What's going on? And I thought, there's always something happening. There's always something to look for. And I realized as I got further down the road, they were advertising for fireworks. I thought maybe Batman was being called for something. And I thought, where do I find that light breaking through? And I thought, what must it have been like for those magi, those magician astrologers, to follow the star, something they'd never seen before that told them something is happening? And what did they find? Not what they expected.
Well, and I think you tapped into it when you said, the way the story is told as if something suddenly appeared to tell them something was happening. but there's always something happening. You know, I tell the stories oftentimes about how when I used to travel as a storyteller and performer in schools, and the librarians would come up afterwards, or a teacher would come up afterwards and say, something about what you said in there, it just reminded me of something my son's going through. And then they would start telling me the story about I didn't say I'm a pastor, you can confess now. I just told this story, you know, and they said, my son's going through this addiction issue. And I started resonating with some of our own experiences. And as I shared some thoughts and I listened and I affirmed and I encouraged, etc., she said, this must have been a God moment. This was a God moment.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, no. They're all God moments, right? They're all sacred moments. They're all epiphanies. They're all moments waiting to be discovered and to encountered.
Absolutely.
But the challenge, of course, is do we have a practice that empowers us for doing that? Do we have a way that empowers us to do that, not just on the comfortable days and the days that we think, I think I'm too busy today, I need to settle down, I need to pull it back a little bit, you know, draw it down a little bit and kind of pay attention more, but especially in those moments where we are encountering discomfort.
Yes.
In those very moments, we have this opportunity to see something we are not seeing. And to invite even more to be the light. Mm-hmm. You know, I was thought about this story as I was thinking about this series. My friend Jim Lawrence, who's a professor out at the Pacific School of Religion, he's a Swedenborgian. A few of you, if you know who that is and what that is, come talk to me. You're one of 1 in 100,000 people who know what that is. There's about 50 churches in the U.S. And he was a Reformationist from Sweden, Emanuel Swedenborg. Anyway, we went to seminary together, and then he went off up to Boston and went to seminary there. And Jim is this amazing, intelligent, brilliant individual, but he's also this irony, this sort of a contradiction of people. So he's got this really intelligent intellect, and he comes to Ministers Week every year. And we haven't done it in a long time, but we used to play racquetball whenever he would come back. We'd play racquetball, and we'd go down to TCU, and we'd play racquetball, and he would soundly beat me. And then he would, after beating me, he would come out and get outside and pick up a pack of cigarettes and take a smoke.
Oh.
And I said, do you smoke? And he says, only when I beat you. I was like, oh, you're just rubbing it in then. He says, nah. He says, you want to know what the most joyful thing is? You know what brings the most joy? And I said, beating me? And he said, no. And then I thought he was trying to trick question. So I said, like a Big Mac, or a double cheeseburger with fries on the side. And he kind of laughed and he said, no. And then he said this quote. I want to make sure I get it right. He said, knowing that you are not alone in this world, that our lives make a difference, that we are brushes and paint and colors on the canvas of one another's lives. Mm-hmm. That's what joy is. Recognizing that none of us are alone and that our lives make a difference, significance, and that we are brushes and colors and paintings on the landscapes of one another's lives. You know, I thought when I listened to it, I thought, well, I forgot the fact that he was this intellectual person who would know a Thoreau quote, even if he kind of messes it up a little bit, but he knows Thoreau very well. And I thought, well, of course he's saying this. But then he says, you know what? When we do these programs, and he does live out this life too, not just being a professor. He participates in Habitat. He participates in the local restaurants that serve those who can't afford to pay and things. And he does all this kind of work. He says, but do you know what the most powerful moments are? He says, it's not the fact that we help somebody. They love having a house, obviously. He says, when we all sit down afterwards to eat. He says, that's the most profound moment. And you know why? Right? Because they connect. Because then you discover, oh wait, you're people, I'm people. We're part of this mess. Right. And when we can begin to listen to one another, we start to find ourselves in these stories. It's very simple kinds of stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I went through CPE, clinical pastoral education, 20 years ago, one of the expressions that I learned in that process was something that really resonates with me still, and it was this: wherever you go, there you are. Kind of profound. And what that says to me is that who I am and how I think about who I am is with me wherever I am. But that doesn't have the final word. We are a process in evolution, in becoming. And we get to choose who that person is as we become and evolve. And I heard a story that I shared with a women's retreat some years ago. And there was this young boy who lived in the Appalachian Mountains, and some traveling reporter came across him selling his wares at a flea market. And he had these incredible whittled carvings of animals. And he especially could do the likeness of a dog. He could imitate or create a whittled dog that looked like the dog that you have at home. And so, of course, they brought him to Johnny Carson. I'm old enough to remember that. They brought him on Johnny Carson and they gave him a basket with little chunks of wood, and he brought his little simple pocket knife, and they said, while you're being interviewed by Johnny, go ahead and start whittling, and let us see how you do this. And so Johnny's interviewing him. When did you start whittling? Do you have a special knife? How do you know what you're going to create? And, he had very simple one-word answers. The interview was not going so well. But as he began to whittle, and this incredible shape of a collie emerged, Johnny said, how do you know what to cut away? And the boy said, I just take off what doesn't look like a dog. Well, I thought about what in my life needs to be taken away so that I can look like who I need to become, who I want to be. That's where the light is.
So we didn't rehearse this, right? So this is what I thought would be kind of fun, because you remind me of that wonderful Rumi quote. Jalaluddin Rumi, the mystic poet from the 16th century, who wrote, don't seek for love, don't look for love, but instead look for the things that we create as barriers to it. Right? Because we always do that. We create these barriers in our lives. And I was reading this book by Anna Lembke. It's called Dopamine Nation. And you can go out there. It's a newish book. It came out last year. It's a fascinating book because it talks about all the ways in which we do things subconsciously, unconsciously, because they feed us dopamine. And if you don't know what dopamine is, it's the brain. It's a neurotransmitter that creates it connects the pleasure centers in your brain. And it does so from something you did so that you go back and do that again, right? It could be anything from being with a grandchild and having a great time, or cooking, or eating, or drugs, or it can be running. It can be anything that gives you some sense of pleasure. It creates this little hit of dopamine, and then it transfers to the brain to say, you got to do that again. The problem is that it can be anything. You can buy something and think, that's really cool. And after a while, you're buying stuff all the time, right? Or that's where you go when you're feeling anxious or stressed. You see how it works. And what happens is that we need more and more and more. But really, the problem there is that what's happening is we're putting barriers on top of ourselves to being present with what's really important. And we do that in so many ways. So the challenge then is to draw it down, minimize it, and look for the small things. Now, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Theravada priest, in his book, Miracle of Mindfulness, many of you know that book, he talks about this. He talks about the simple things that we can do to be more present in the moments. From the thing that DeAndrea was doing about practicing just being present to our breath, which is really hard, right? How many of you in here were completely absent of everything in a void somewhere? We're thinking about what everybody's saying. We're thinking about what we're hearing. We're thinking about the thoughts we can't get rid of. Why can't I get rid of that thought? There's another one. Dang it, I can't get rid of anything. And we get into these spirals. The practice is to learn to be present enough so that when we actually are present to things, we don't miss them. And we discover the magic in those moments. So he'd say you're going to wash a dish. You're not washing the dish so that you can go do something else. You're washing the dish. You can't go do the next thing because you don't even know how to wash a dish. That's pretty much how we do everything. I remember being with a friend of mine years ago who had cancer, and she subsequently has died. But for the longest time, she had survived because of these experimental drugs. And she was one of these really go-getter kind of people. She had really sort of been this counter reactionary to kind of trying to break the glass ceiling as a woman. So she had been an engineer, and she moved on up the ladder. And as she did, she found herself just driven until she got a diagnosis of cancer, and it literally turned everything upside down, right? And that happens. We know what that feels like when a tragedy strikes or when something else comes right out from under us or a pandemic hits and everything's called to stop. And now what do we do? And she said she really had to learn how to pay attention more to the moments. She had given up until they found this experimental drug, and then they basically said, well, we're going to try it 6 months at a time and see how it goes. So she lived her life 6 months at a time, which was really fascinating, because when I went and saw her, I expected either this very depressed kind of broken person or this driven person to defeat. And instead, I found this kid, this child, just everything was kind of magic moment. She said, oh, whoa, wait, you guys got to come out, because there were several of us there. She said, you guys got to come outside. It was getting dusk. And she said, you got to come over here. And she had this garden in the back. I'd never heard of these. They were primroses. You know what primroses do when it starts turning dark? They blossom. It's the craziest thing. She said, watch this bush. And we said, we're looking at a bush. She said, watch it. And we're staring at it. It goes, poof. All of them just, poof, they all just kind of blow up. Yellow and white. And she was like, whoa. And I thought to myself, it was amazing to see it. But what was more amazing was to see how amazing it was for her. Because I thought, I want that.
Absolutely.
I want to be amazed.
When I did my little story with you a while back, I shared one of my favorite quotes that I learned here at 1111 by Leonard Cohen, and it says, ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So where in our lives are those fractures, those cracks that we don't like, that we try to hide or cover up? How can we accept and celebrate that as an opportunity to change and grow and be transformed? And I want to give you a warning. As we move into what Tom is offering us for spiritual mindfulness, for practices of spiritual discipline, you will not leave here unchanged. It's transformative. It will chip away at the stone that doesn't look like the real you. And it's pretty cool when that happens, because it's letting go, and it's embracing, and it's breathing in whatever will be. And it may not be what you had pictured, but it is beautiful.
So before we finish, come on out, band. Y'all can come on out and get in position while they're looking up here at the screen. So we're going to finish up here. Go ahead and show these couple of pictures real quickly. We'll just stand here. Yeah. First, this is my favorite one, right? Come on, let's just be real, because it kind of feels like that sometimes. I wanted to do my Neo, my Mr. Anderson. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Neo, Mr. Anderson. Come on, Matrix people. No? Okay. So, Mr. Anderson. Anyway, so I wanted to have him doing his whole come on, after he does his whole judo thing, and he goes, come on. But anyway, that kind of reminded me. Next picture. This is really how we deal with that cat in the alley. If people are outside and looked up at the stars each night, I bet they'd think a lot different, live a lot different. How so? Well, when you look into infinity, you realize that there are more important things than what people do all day. Next picture. I love this one. This is a Rumi quote. If your eyes are opened, you'll see the things worth seeing. So here's what's going to happen this week, tonight and tomorrow night. Tonight at 2 a.m., beautiful night. There's no clouds in the sky. The quantidids are shining, the meteor shower. The quantidids are coming tonight. They've been around for a couple of weeks, but we haven't been able to see them, but they're at the peak tonight, 2 a.m. in the morning. Who's going to get up? Come on! You could see as many as 75 an hour. Ooh. If you look out just past just around the Big Dipper, you look right around the Big Dipper and you'll see them 75 an hour. These meteors, they're part of an asteroid. Oh, here's the fascinating thing. They're part of an asteroid that doesn't exist anymore. I'm sorry, they're part of a comet, that doesn't exist anymore. Huh. Isn't that amazing? Do you know when you look at the stars and you're seeing the stars, you're actually looking at something 1 million years ago, right? because we're seeing the light from those stars, but not actually the stars. Doesn't it just remind you we're so much more than we think we are, and so much less than we have to be? Isn't that amazing? That's what that reminds me of. So go out and be amazed and see those tonight. And then if not that, take a little bit of practice to spend some time to think about what you're doing in the smallest ways. Just one thing. And just every time you do that, your new practice will be to truly do what you are doing in that moment in every way you can experience it and be present to it. And just see how that changes your day. And here we close with this quote before the band ends our final epiphanal song. I think this is what the guys saw when they saw the child, by the way, the refugee, the baby, the thing that shouldn't have been there, the thing that was marginalized, the experience, the people that were marginalized. And what did they see but light? I think what they saw was, whoa, we thought we had a hand on things. It's so much bigger. But we're a part of it. Hafiz said, I wish I could show you, when you are lonely or in darkness, the astonishing light right now of your own being.